This is Chapter 3, Lesson 1, Add and Subtract Decimals. So this first box I have here says add decimals. To add decimals, line up the blank points. So in that blank, you're going to write decimal. So you're going to line up the decimal points, then add digits in the same place value positions, okay? So a couple of examples that we have here. The first one says find the sum, so again, sum means adding, of 23.1, 23 and 1/10, and 5.8 or 5 and 8/10, okay? So I need to make sure I add up the line up the decimal places. So here I have one place behind the decimal and one place behind the decimal. Okay, so I'm going to line them up. So I make sure my decimal points are lined up, and then I add numbers. So 8 plus 1 gives me 9. 5 plus 3 gives me 8. And then 2 plus 0, because there's an imaginary 0 here, equals 2. So I get 28.9 or 28 and 9/10. Okay. So let's find the sum of 29.6 and 14.7. So I can estimate first. So 29.6 is about 30, and 14.7 is about 15. Well, 30 plus 15 is about 45. So I should be around 45. Okay? So let's look at the example. So I have to line up my decimal points. So the very first thing that I want to do, okay, is line these numbers up. So I have 6, so 29.6, and then I have 14.7. So the decimal points line up. Then I have 6 and 7 line up because they're in the same place value spots. 9 and 4 line up because they're in the same place value spots, the 1 spots. And 2 and 1 are in the same place value spots. So now I add. 7 plus 6 gives me 13. I bring down the decimal point and I carry the 1. 9 plus 1 is 10, plus 4 is 14. And I carry the 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 plus 1 is 4. So I get 44.3. Well, that was pretty close to my estimate of 45, so that seems reasonable. So the sum of 29.6 and 14.7 is 44.3. Okay. So now that we've talked about adding decimals, let's talk about subtracting decimals. So in the box here at the top of the page, it says subtract decimals. To subtract decimals, line up the blank points. Again, in this blank, you're going to write decimals. Then subtract digits in the same place value position. You may need to annex or place zeros at the end of the decimal in order to subtract. Okay, so annex is just a fancy way of saying I'm adding zeros in. All right, so let's look at some examples. The first example says find 6 minus 4.78. So I can round 4 to about 5. So 6 minus 5 gives me about 1, right? So 6 minus 5 equals 1. So we know my answer is probably going to be right around 1. So let's try it, okay? So 6.00, I annexed zeros, or I added zeros on, so I had enough so I could actually subtract this, right? So because I still have to line up my decimal points. Okay, so when I do that, I have to borrow. Okay, so 10 minus 8 gives me 2. And I borrowed here. 9 minus 7 gives me 2. 5 minus 4 gives me 1, so I get 1.22. This seems like a reasonable answer because it's very close to our estimate. So now you try. Find 23 minus 4.216. So again, I need to annex zeros. So when I line this up, I have 23, that's the number they originally gave me, and 4.216. So I lined up my decimals. 3 and 4 are in the same place value. Okay, but I can see that I have 3 numbers behind the decimal, so I need to annex 3 zeros. Okay, in order for me to actually subtract this. So when I subtract, I borrow. Okay, 10 minus 4 gives me 6. 9 minus 1 gives me 8. 9 minus 2 gives me 7. I can't do 2 minus 4, so I have to borrow again. 12 minus 4 gives me 8, and then 1. So I get 18.784. You can always double check and make sure by going back and adding what you got, so the difference and the value. So I can take 18.784 and add it to 4.216, and I should get 23. So 23 minus 4.216 does give me 18.784, or 18 and 784 hundredths. Okay. So you also have this poster over here on the side, which you are also welcome to color. Okay, so plus and minus decimals. Rule 1, you line them up. Rule 2, drop it down. Rule 3, fill them in. Rule 4, add or subtract. Okay, so line them up. You line up the decimals, drop the decimal point down, add any zeros in where you need to, so fill them in, and then add or subtract the two numbers. Okay. Now there are 6 try it problems. I want you to go ahead, pause the video, try out the try it problems, and when you come back, we will go over the answers together. All right, now that you've tried the try it problems on your own, let's go over the answers together. So the first one I have is 54.7 plus 21.4. So I need to line up the decimals. Okay. I'm going to drop the decimal point down. I don't need to fill in any zeros. And then I'm going to add them together. 7 plus 4 gives me 11. 1 plus 4 is 5. Plus 1 is 6. 5 plus 2 is 7. So 76.1. Letter B, I have 14.2 plus 23.5. I line them up. Drop down my point. Don't have to fill anything in. I add them. 2 plus 5 is 7. 4 plus 3 is 7. 1 plus 2 is 3. So 37.7. Letter C, I have 17.3 plus 33.5. Line up the decimal points. Drop down the decimal. Don't have anything to fill in, so I add them together. 3 plus 5 is 8. 7 plus 3 is 10. I carry the 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Plus 3 is 5. So I get 50.8. Okay. letter D, I have 9.543 minus 3.671. So I'm going to line up my decimals. I have dropped my decimal point. I don't have to annex anything. So I'm going to subtract. 3 minus 1 is 2. I borrow. 14 minus 7 is 7. I borrow again. 14 minus 6 is 8. And 8 minus 3 is 5. So I get 5.872. For letter E, I have 50.62 and 39.81. So I line up my decimals. I don't need to annex any zeros. Drop down my decimal point. Subtract. 2 minus 1 is 1. 6 minus 8 I can't do, so I have to borrow. 16 minus 8 is 8. Okay. Nine minus 9 is 0, and 5 minus 3 is 2. Okay. For letter F, I have 14 minus 9.09. I line up my decimals. In this case, 14, I can add a decimal point there, drop down my decimals, annex 2 zeros. Okay? 0 minus 9 I can't do, so I have to borrow. 10 minus 9 is 1. 9 minus 0 is 9. And then 13 minus 9 is 4. So 4.91. And that is the end of lesson 1.